Good evening and welcome to Adelaide University for the launch this evening of the Jean Monnet Centre of Excellence for Digital Transformations. My name is Anthony Elliott. I'm the Bradley Distinguished Professor of Sociology and Executive Director of this new centre here at Adelaide University, and it's my great pleasure to be chairing tonight's discussion. Right at the outset, I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting on Kaurna land, and I'd like to pay our respects to the traditional owners, past, present and future, of these beautiful lands. We have a number of distinguished guests with us this evening, and I'd like to just take a moment just to extend our thanks to people for coming along this evening, to Mr. Ernesto Pinelli, the Consul of Italy in South Australia, to Mr. Steen Jensen, the Honorary Consul of Denmark in South Australia, to Dr. Eva Peterson, the Honorary Consul of Belgium in South Australia, to other distinguished guests from the South Australian Consular Corps, to Ms. Lucienne Manton, the Assistant Secretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and here closer to home at Adelaide University, to Professor Shane Dawson, Pro-Vice-Chancellor, the College of Education, Behavioural and Social Sciences, to Professor Sam Seller, the Dean of Research here in the College, Professor Matthew White, the Dean of International Engagement in the College, and to Laurie Hocking, Pro-Vice-Chancellor of Global Partnerships. Well, distinguished guests, colleagues and friends, I'm hugely excited to host tonight's public lecture by the EU Ambassador to Australia, His Excellency Mr. Gabriele Visentin, at the launch of the event for this new Jean Monnet Centre of Excellence in Digital Transformations. As everyone knows, the digital revolution is arguably the most transformative force in the world today. In the brave new world of apps, algorithms and artificial intelligence, we've got these massive transformations to social, economic and political institutions, but not just institutional life. We're seeing a huge transformation, I think, also of private life and of people's identities. And it's sort of at that intersection, a kind of worrying away over the sort of public institutions, but the transformations happening in the private realm, that much of the work of the new centre is going to be pitched, along with a rethinking of issues of regulation and governance of digitalisation. And to do that in the context of the dynamic relationship between the European Union and Australia represents a fantastic opportunity for researchers, staff and students working at this new centre. But to say more about all of that and to launch the new centre, as well as to introduce tonight's speaker, I'd now like to welcome to the stage the Pro-Vice-Chancellor of the University, Professor Shane Dawson. Shane.
Thank you, Anthony, and good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to see you all here tonight. Thank you for joining us tonight. We gather to launch Adelaide University's Jean Monnet Centre of Excellence for Digital Transformations, and to mark the next chapter in a partnership between Europe and Australia that is both strategic and values-driven, and I'll touch on a couple of those points. Firstly, this centre is co-founded by the European Union's Erasmus Plus program and our College of Education, Behavioural and Social Sciences. It builds on more than a decade of collaboration with the EU, and one that I wasn't aware of. In fact, this is the fourth Jean Monnet Centre that's been awarded here since 2014. The centre includes a fantastic team, an interdisciplinary team with Professor Susan Luckman, Dr. Ross Boyd, Dr. Eric Zhu, Dr. Louis Everest, and Adjunct Professor Mike Inns with the Centre's Executive Director, Professor Anthony Elliott. At its core, this centre is about connections. It's a connection between Europe and Australia. It's a connection between research and policy. And it's a connection between digital innovation and the values that shape how we will use it, presently and well into the future. The Centre focuses on three key areas: artificial intelligence and fintech, creative work in the age of generative AI, and digital regulation, governance and ethics. These are not just technical questions, as Anthony highlighted. These are primarily societal questions, and they're questions that we are grappling with globally. They ask how we foster innovation while protecting rights, how we encourage creativity while ensuring fairness, and how we design digital systems that strengthen, don't diminish or weaken our democratic processes. These are questions that are global, and they are deeply aligned with the shared aspirations of the European Union and Australia. In a time of rapid technological disruption and geopolitical uncertainty, alignment like this matters. It enables cooperation, it builds resilience, and it strengthens our collective capacity to shape the digital future rather than simply reacting to it. A defining feature of this centre will be engagement beyond the academy, to bring research into dialogue with policymakers, to bring research into dialogue with industry leaders, the public, and this is a representation of our ambassadorial lecture series that we're here tonight. It is entirely fitting that we launch the centre with His Excellency Mr. Gabriele Visentin. Before arriving in Australia, the Ambassador Visentin served as the European Union's first special envoy for the Indo-Pacific, a role that underscores the growing strategic importance of our area. He has held senior positions within the European External Action Service and the European Commission and brings deep experience in diplomacy, strategy and international partnership. We are honoured to have him here in Adelaide this evening, and I welcome Your Excellency Mr. Gabriele Visentin to deliver your address, the EU-Australia Strategic Alignment. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks a lot to Adelaide University for having me on this very happy occasion. So I'm really happy and even honored to be here for the launch of this Jean Monnet Centre for Digital Transformation, and really thankful for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. As well as you did, Anthony, before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. And I also extend my respect to any First Nation people here this evening amongst us. And, well, Anthony, you acknowledged anybody who had to be acknowledged. So thank you for having done my job as well. So please feel all acknowledged by me as well. So, Europe and Australia are indeed separated by more than 15,000 kilometers of ocean. On a map, we sit at opposite ends of the world, and our days barely overlap. Don't tell me when I have to work on two different time zones. And our seasons run in reverse. And yet, today, Europe and Australia are closer than ever. And what has changed is not geography. What has changed is the world and the choices we are making within it. We are living in an era where distance matters less than trust, where shared values matter more than shared borders, and where partnership is defined not by proximity, but by purpose. And ours is not a partnership born of necessity. It is one built by design, shaped by strategic foresight and shared ambition. And it is increasingly influencing how Europe engages with the Indo-Pacific and how Australia works with Europe. So every enduring partnership rests on strong foundations. For Europe and Australia, that foundation is not geography. It is shared values, a commitment to democracy, respect for the rule of law, protection of human rights, a belief in open societies and accountable institutions, and a clear understanding that multilateralism and a rules-based international order remain essential to global stability. The European Union was founded on the conviction that cooperation achieves what confrontation never can. Australia global engagement reflects the same belief. that strong institutions and clear rules create opportunity, security, and trust. And this alignment gives our partnership resilience. It provides steadiness in uncertain times and enables meaningful cooperation between governments, businesses, and communities. And we are indeed living in uncertain times, as you said, Anthony. We are witnessing the return of overt geopolitical rivalry and power politics. And our democratic foundations and the trust of our citizens are being tested in new and complex ways. From territorial disputes to tariffs, from supply chains to technology standards, we see a simple reality in today's fractured world. When unilateral action and coercive practices become more visible, cooperation among like-minded partners is not merely desirable, it is indispensable. So this shared strategic outlook has led the European Union to deepen engagement with partners like Australia. We recognize that the Indo-Pacific is central to global prosperity and security. And what happens here matters everywhere. So our partnership is strategic and it is economic. So the EU is one of Australia's largest trading partners. To be precise, it's the third trading partner after China and Japan. And we are the second largest source of foreign investment. And by the way, Southern Australia, in its own remit, has shared the same place in terms of investment and bilateral trade with the EU. So Southern Australia as well has as a second trading partner the EU, like the Commonwealth has. So, and we celebrated last month the 1 billion thresholds of bilateral trade between Southern Australia and the EU. So in March 2025, we reached a yearly exchange of 1 billion. So we joined the 1 billion club. Thank you very much. We said that European companies are deeply embedded in Australia's economy, just as Australian firms are expanding their footprint across Europe, which means access to 450 million person market that accounts for more than 60% of global trade. Mind you, this is the biggest trading bloc of the world, and has a total GDP of 34 trillion Australian dollars. Size matters, huh? So, this means jobs, growth, consumer choice, and economic resilience. But what I see from this is also a great deal of opportunity, especially for the Australian states. So recently I visited various states, including Queensland and Western Australia, with my fellow EU ambassadors. And of course, we were struck by the immense opportunities that exist for deepening our bilateral relations also at states level. And here in South Australia, with its, I have to say, proud European heritage, I mean, more than 70% of you have European roots, the benefits of engagement with Europe are very, very tangible. So, as I said, last year the EU has become $1 billion export market for South Australia. And mind you, the state export surged by more than 20% in 1 year towards the EU. So I guess that this has a lot to do with the fact that in Europe now we are drinking much more wine than before, so probably this is why your exceptional wines are making it through. But we should not forget the advanced manufacturing and the diversity of our trade relations, which matter a lot also for South Australia. But furthermore, the EU and Australia share a strong interest in open markets that are fair, transparent, and rules-based, and predictable. Because we know that closing doors does not make us safer, it makes us more vulnerable. And if you allow me, if you want to gain a very good understanding of the case for greater trade relations between Australia and the EU, I encourage you all to obtain a copy of the University of Adelaide's latest publication, which is the Australia-EU Trade Relations in the Global Context. It's a very, very good lecture, so I will really invite you. It's very compelling case for deeper EU-Australia collaboration. So have a look, and maybe in the next weeks or so, we might get inspiration out of that. Yeah? So, as the Commission President von der Leyen highlighted very recently, we Europeans believe in fair trade over tariffs, in partnership over isolation, in sustainability over exploitation. And because we are serious about creating a stable, risk-free global economic environment, we are in a strong position to work with our friends and allies to create a stable, predictable, secure, and prosperous world. And our vision is shared by our like-minded partners, like Australia. Moreover, as Professor Freitag and Professor Hayes argue in the publication I just mentioned, Australia and the EU need deeper bilateral and plurilateral ties with others through deals like an Australia-EU FTA and greater cooperation within a regional framework like the CPTPP. So, just in the past months, the EU has moved forward the EU-Mercosur trade agreement and signed an FTA with India. The agreement with Mercosur creates a market worth over 20% of the global GDP, encompassing 31 countries with over 700 million consumers. Likewise, the FTA with India has created a market of 2 billion people, accounting for almost a quarter of global GDP and bringing together the second and fourth largest economic blocs. So, Europe wants to do business with the growth centers of today and the economic powerhouses of this century, and that, of course, include you guys, our friends in Australia. So, I know you will all be aware of the recent negotiations in Brussels between Commissioner for Trade Maros Šefčovič and Commissioner for Agriculture Hansen with Minister Farrell, from Adelaide, by the way, your fellow citizen, last week. So we are not yet at the finish line, but the remaining gaps have really, really narrowed considerably. So, as I might say, it is a little like a fine South Australian Shiraz. It requires patience, but when ready, it's really worth the wait. So, in a world where protectionism is re-emerging, and quite brutally, a comprehensive and ambitious trade agreement between the EU and Australia would send a powerful message that open, fair, and rules-based trade remains a driver of prosperity. And don't forget that tariffs are a hidden tax on citizens and businesses. Tariffs hit Main Street and Wall Street alike. So the right answer to tariffs is simply more trade based on rules. So let me now turn to another area of interest for South Australian security, for South Australians, which is security and defense. So not long ago, Europe and Australia were viewed as operating in separate strategic security theaters. And that is not the reality. The growing alignment between Russia and China has underscored how actions in one region can have profound consequences in another. The security of Europe and the stability of the Indo-Pacific are deeply interconnected. And Russia's unjust war of aggression against Ukraine is not merely an attack on one nation. It is an assault on the principles that bind us: sovereignty, territorial integrity, internationally recognized borders, and the right of every country to choose its own future. Peace and freedom are inseparable, and protecting them is the core purpose of security policy. And that is what Ukraine is fighting for. Its right to live free and in a functioning democracy. So, for years after Russia's war brought devastation to cities, terror to civilians, and instability to the global economy, the European Union stands firmly with Ukraine. And not only its defense of freedom, but in its pursuit of a just and lasting peace grounded in international law and credible security guarantees. And I have to say that Australia has also stood resolutely with Ukraine. The government has recognized that Russia's aggression is not a distant European issue. It has global implication. It challenges the very principles that underpin international order and the UN Charter. So Australia has so far provided more than 1.7 billion Australian dollars to Ukraine. And this is the largest contribution to Ukraine from a non-NATO country. And let me say that the EU is also extremely grateful to Ukraine, to Australia, because the support to Ukraine means also support to the EU. When you do support Ukraine, you support peace and security in Europe as well. Therefore, anything which supports Ukraine from Australia is also support to the EU. And for this, I wholeheartedly thank Australia. So, this is not Ukraine's fight alone. It's a defense of values we all share. And just yesterday, for example, a resolution passed in New York at the UN on calling for an immediate ceasefire. And it was the 32nd resolution which was jointly sponsored by the EU, Ukraine, and Australia on the matter of the conflict. So just to tell you how your support or the international community support is not just bilateral towards Ukraine, but it's also happening within the multilateral fora which still operate, like the UN. And this is a very important political step. So yesterday, the 32nd co-sponsored UN resolution passed. So this is really quite an achievement in terms of like-mindedness and united action. So in response to this security challenges, not just the war against Ukraine, but also the tensions in other parts of the world, the European Union is strengthening its role as a global security actor, increasing defense investment, deepening partnerships, and contributing to stability beyond our immediate neighborhood. And together with Australia, we are addressing shared security threats and advancing convergent strategic interests. Building on established cooperation in cybersecurity, maritime security, countering foreign information manipulation and interference, combating disinformation, addressing hybrid threats, we are now working towards a structured security and defense partnership between the EU and Australia. So, another aspect where resilience is really needed is on the supply chains and the critical raw materials. And one of the fastest growing areas of EU-Australia cooperation is critical and rare earth minerals. These resources are indispensable to the green and digital transitions, from renewable energy technologies and electric vehicles to advanced manufacturing and defense systems. And Australia brings abundant resources and world-class expertise in extraction. The EU brings industrial capacity, technological innovation, huge financial capitals, and a strong regulatory framework for sustainability. And this is why it was really a matching interest. In May 2024, we, the EU and Australia, signed a strategic partnership on critical raw materials. Together, we are working to build a secure, diversified, and responsible system for supply chains. And mind you, this is not about protectionism. It is about resilience, and it is about ensuring that the transition to a greener and safer world is not only ambitious, but achievable, without allowing countries to weaponize the green transition. So, if there is one domain where geography has truly lost its meaning, it is in the digital sphere. Data travel between Europe and Australia in milliseconds. Businesses collaborate across oceans as if they were next door. And researchers connect across time zones seamlessly. I mean, if they don't fall asleep. Digital transformation is not simply technological. It is structural. It is reshaping our economies, societies, and democracies. And digital cooperation is now a central pillar of the EU-Australia partnership. We share a commitment to democratic digital governance, protecting privacy, strengthening cybersecurity, and ensuring artificial intelligence is developed responsibly and ethically. And across Europe, we have introduced a robust framework to regulate digital markets and artificial intelligence in ways that balance innovation with fundamental rights and public safety. Australia has also shown leadership in cybersecurity, online safety, and protection of minors. For example, Australia's landmark minimum age legislation for social media demonstrated what determined leadership can achieve. And when critics said it could not be done, you persisted, you did it, and Europe took notice. President von der Leyen, in her last address in front of the European Parliament, referred to the Australian legal framework as an example to be watched carefully, and two EU member states have already enacted legislation along yours, France and Denmark, and others will follow. And I think that the best line was from my president. Of course, she's my boss. Of course, she gives the best lines. But she said something that we can all share. She said that it's not for algorithms to educate our children, but it is for the parents to educate and the schools to educate the children. So we should not let the algorithms, we should not let the big techs to dominate and influence and shape how our young people think and reason. So, as I said, inspired by your example, momentum is now spreading across Europe on this kind of sensitivity and on this kind of legislative action. So by exchanging best practices and aligning standards, we are not reacting to technological change. We are shaping global digital norms. But there is more to do. So, emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, space technologies, advanced clean tech, are transforming industries at an unprecedented speed. No country can lead alone, and trusted partnerships reduce risk and accelerate progress. And cybersecurity, too, demands collective action. Threats do not respect borders. By coordinating responses and sharing expertise, we strengthen not only our own systems, but the broader international digital ecosystem. And in the digital age, the question is no longer how far apart we are, but how securely and how intelligently we are connected. And in many respects, the digital transformation makes Europe and Australia neighbors. Another area where EU-Australia partnership already truly shines is science and research. Scientific cooperation is one of the quiet successes of international relations. It does not always make headlines, but it delivers real-world results. European and Australian researchers have been working together for more than 30 years on climate science, health and medical research, advanced manufacturing, space, and a panoply of emerging technologies. And what I find especially encouraging is that science reminds us of a simple truth. Curiosity has no borders. It moves freely across countries, cultures, and continents. And scientists are guided by evidence and facts. As diplomats, we admire that clarity, even if our own language is sometimes a little more carefully chosen. So when scientists disagree, they run another experiment. When diplomats disagree, we often form a working group or shut up. But behind the humor lies something really serious. Curiosity, I call it curiosity, can only grow when there is freedom. Scientists need academic and scientific freedom to ask difficult questions, to challenge assumptions, and to follow the evidence. So, scientific research has to be free. It cannot be ideologically driven, and it cannot be artificially limited. And I'm not thinking about any specific country, but I'm just giving sort of philosophical ideas. So through EU research programs and bilateral cooperation, we are pooling talent, sharing knowledge, and accelerating innovation, and giving science freedom. Academic freedom. Freedom of thought, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, and, well, I can continue. And this is why I'm delighted that Australia and the EU have already concluded non-binding exploratory talks for Australia to be associated to Horizon Europe, which is the EU's flagship research and innovation program, which is endowed with around 160 billion Australian dollars. The Horizon Europe will come to an end in 2027. Its successor is already being proposed. It will be adopted within this year by the EU member states, and it will almost double its budget. It will go up to 180 billion euros, which makes 310 billion Australians. So Horizon Europe is really a unique platform for global scientific collaboration, which enables researchers and institutions to work alongside world-class partners on frontier research, addressing major societal and technological challenges. So, should Australia choose to associate with the program, as others have done, like UK, Canada, New Zealand, Japan, Korea, Switzerland, Israel, and soon, before the end of the year, India, Australian researchers would gain direct access to the benefit of the stability of a 7-year cycle that supports long-term planning and sustained research excellence. And furthermore, the association to Horizon would position Australia at the forefront of global innovation, strengthening its research ecosystem and enhancing its capacity to develop breakthrough technologies and solutions aligned with international priorities and excellence. And this would include top research, where here in South Australia you are really world-class. Like medical, like climate change mitigation, and as we say, cyber and digital. So, while the association is a sovereign decision that the Australian government will take, bearing into account the national interest of Australia, from the EU point of view, I will simply say that Australia would be warmly welcomed, and they would be part of quite an exclusive and very rewarding club. So please make it known also to your government. So institutions create frameworks, but it's people who create partnerships. As I said before, over 70% of Australians have European heritage. And students moving between European and Australian university, Charlotte, yeah, isn't it? Form friendships and professional networks that last decades or even a lifetime. And researchers collaborate across continents. Entrepreneurs explore new markets. Cultural exchanges deepen mutual understanding. And diaspora communities enrich our societies. Tourism builds familiarity, and familiarity builds trust. So in a world which is increasingly marked by polarization, human connections remind us that international partnership is, at its core, about people. And the more our citizens engage with one another, the stronger our political and economic ties become. So places like this, university, hosting or being part of Erasmus Plus, are the clearest possible evidence of this. So let me conclude where I began. So Europe and Australia may be 50,000 kilometers apart. Yes, they are. but what defines true proximity is shared purpose. And across oceans and time zones, Europe and Australia are transforming shared values into practical daily cooperation. We are linking markets, research communities, and digital ecosystems. We are aligning strategic outlooks, and we are strengthening resilience. So what was once a relationship limited by geography is now defined by ambition. And together, we are helping shape a global future that is more secure, more inclusive, more respectful, and more resilient. So we are building not only connections, but a shared future where everybody can thrive. Thank you very much.
Firstly, thank you so much for the reflections that you've offered us this evening. It was fantastic to get such a broad overview of these developments as you see them. One of the things that really struck me hearing you talk tonight was the extent of, I suppose I kept thinking, so one key thing that's underlying the different aspects of the changing relations between EU and Australia was namely change itself. There seemed to be so much change underpinning what's happening. Just for example, to take what you were saying about when you were talking about, for instance, in the digital space, the experiment in Australia with the ban on social media for under 16s. I mean, this is obviously a real-time experiment, which is really fascinating and very important for us to learn about the reactions in Europe and countries that are responding in Europe. But if we could flip that around the other way, what I'm struck by are some of the debates that are going on within the EU over things like, digital public money, the digital omnibus. I mean, there are huge developments happening in terms of digital transformation that I think Australia can learn from in terms of what the EU is doing. Could you just say a little bit more about that space, given that we are a centre of digital transformations? It'd be great to hear you just reflect a little bit further on that.
Definitely. Well, Anthony, I'm a simple, poor ambassador. I'm not a professor on this kind of thing, so I will not be able to get into the details of that. You might be much more specific. But what I can tell you is that there are a couple of key principles around which all the EU legislation is shaped. The first is that the key thing for us, the central bit, is that the human element is key and primordial to anything. So, first of all the legislation has to ensure that the persons are, let's say, protected. And only after you develop business. So businesses cannot be harmful to men. So first come the protection of the consumer, first come the protection of the human element, first come the preservation of health, and then the business dimension. So there is, sometimes it's a thin line, but it's not that thin when you understand what would be against the human welfare and what would just allow companies to profit. So this is the key thing. We call it here we are in a university, so I can use a sort of a difficult word, anthropocentric. That's an anthropocentric way of looking at things. And this is the clear message. The other clear message is that, I mentioned in my speech the size of the European market, the amount of money that this has, and the amount of population that this comprises. And so in a way, I say it very respectfully, but I say, our market, our rules. You want to do business, you have to respect our citizens, and you have to respect our laws. So this is also something that I think resonates very much in the Australian public opinion, namely the protection of the Australian consumer, of the Australian teenager, the protection of your laws, and the independence of your own independence against maybe bigger or huge businesses that would like to profit as well from one of the richest countries in the world. Because mind you, you are the second richest country in the world, if you don't know it, according to the international standards. You are the second richest country in terms of net wealth per adult, and the second richest country in the world for a net disposable income per household. So be mindful of that.
The houses we live in don't make us feel like that.
No, probably that's the rising price of the house puts you there. So that makes you very rich. Yeah. Okay. No, but jokes apart, it's really important to understand that there is one is the protection of the person, of the people, and the other one is the independence and the sovereignty of each state to decide for its own and to impose its legislation and to allow access to its market, to its money, to its people according to its own decisions.
Ambassador, because we're tight for time, and we're going to move on to something else in a moment before we go out, and
which actually
and we ask everyone to join us.
Is what I care
drink.
The most, the one which we're moving on.
So that will be good. But just before we get to that, I've just got one more query, which is, and this is a bit broader. I suppose it's partly asking you to maybe look through your ambassadorial crystal ball and predict parts of the future. But I kept thinking, hearing you talk tonight, in a really short space of time, it's as if we've gone from, if you think, the end, when the Berlin Wall came down, and Francis Fukuyama talking about the end of history. And it seems to me much of what we're hearing tonight in 2026, it's like we're going off the edge of history in a way. We're in a world where conservatives are developing these quite radical proposals, political proposals. We're in a world where political radicals are now actually saying we've got to conserve all sorts of institutions and traditions. But the one thing that you kept going back to with the EU was this focus, of course, on a rules-based order. I mean, this is the core of the EU, the rules-based order. How much innovation can the EU do in that context of its commitment to the rule-based order? Because clearly there's something going on in these early decades of the 21st century, whereas you began your lecture by talking about the geopolitical shifts. There's a lot happening at the moment. Just in terms of the level of experimentation that you're witnessing in the time that you've been at the EU, do you think we're likely to see more experimentation, more engagement, more multilateralism as the EU tries to search for these new pathways into the next decade?
I would not call them experiment. I would call them development. Probably we have to also acknowledge the necessity that the international system and the international institutions adapt to the times, to changing times. I mean, we all have to be made aware that the international or the multilateral institutions have been all set up around the end of World War II, which makes 80 years ago. So we probably need to adapt their functioning system, their impact. We have also to be aware of the rising importance of we can call them mini or regional multilateral institutions. Well, look, for example, the Quad is an important one. So I think we have to be flexible enough to understand what the new world is requiring us in order to preserve the principle that international rules matter. But we cannot, for example, defend institutions which are not able to deliver or which are not fit for purpose anymore and which do require some innovation. Yeah. So to keep them alive, we have to modernize them. The EU itself has to modernize itself. It was born in the 50s. We have decision-making mechanisms which do not allow us to be super efficient or super quick. Still, we do deliver, and we deliver very well, but we could really make our institutions better. I think that what you refer to as experiments can be seen as adapting to a new world, and this is definitely something we have to look at, and we are very much aligned with Australia on this. When we, for example, talk about the reform of the UN system, we're not talking about killing the UN system. We are not talking about not financing anymore the UN system like others do. We are talking about reforming the UN system so that it can be equipped to continue to deliver for the future.
Well, we certainly look forward to that, viewing how that adaptation, that development, that experimentation unfolds going forward. Ambassador, I'm just also mindful of the fact that tonight you wanted to offer some comments and remarks about a colleague that you worked with closely.
Yep.
And that her daughter, so I'm referring to Rafaela Yudicha, and her daughter Charlotte de Wolf is with us this evening.
Yeah.
But I'll hand back to you to make these comments.
Yeah. I might turn emotional, Charlotte. Huh? So, Rafaela is in herself, I will talk about her, but really embodies what the EU stands for. Rafaela was a fantastic EU civil servant. She served in many services, including she was our chargé d'affaires in Kabul, in Afghanistan. When nobody else was present, she was the only Western diplomat present in Kabul, in Afghanistan, as a woman. She was able to extract from Afghanistan more than 400 people who worked for the EU delegation, because we, Europeans, did not let our our workers behind us in the hands of the Taliban. It took us a while, but we took them all out of Afghanistan and we took them to Europe. There was nobody left behind. But this was due thanks to Rafaela, who was organizing minibuses secretly, putting these guys in at night in the bus that would drive them to Pakistan, and then from there they would be flown to Europe. Rafaela was able to go to the prisons, to the Taliban prisons, to take people out. And Rafaela was the only glimpse of hope for women and for young girls, because you know that the Taliban have forbidden women from going to school. Well, she was going to buy school books, copybooks, pens, putting them in market bags and going at night and distributing them to girls, hosting secretly in basements classes for girls. So she was the embodiment of what the EU stands for: human rights, a diplomacy which is attached to people, taking care of the ones who nobody looks at, and she was inspirational to all of us. I had the privilege to know her for many years, and I feel really honored and I'm very moved to pay tribute to her here tonight. Why? Because Charlotte, her daughter, who honors us with her presence tonight, is one of the students that I mentioned in my speech, who came to Australia, studied here in the university, and now she's happily established professional here in Adelaide. So we will hear from her soon. But I really wanted to pay tribute to Rafaela in front of you, Charlotte, to your sister as well, and to all your family, and I don't know, probably Lucien is kept somewhere. Oh, here, because you are, come, please. I did not see you. It's because, I did not mention it because I did not see you, but I would like really to say that one of the other things that I wanted to say about Rafaela is that the ones who knew her, who worked with her, have an indelible memory of her. And again, the like-mindedness with Australia. I mean, Lucien, you work with Rafaela. You shared a lot of her battle. You supported her. The work also that Australia is doing in Afghanistan to support girls and women is remarkable. And so you found a soulmate probably in Rafaela there. So anyhow, I am extremely moved and honored to be able to remember her here in front of Charlotte and you, Lucien. So we have her family and we have her colleagues, and I am a living memory, and I thank you all for being here and paying tribute to such an incredible and extraordinary human being. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Ambassador, for your invitation today, and thank you very much for hosting us, distinguished representatives of Adelaide University and all of you here today. But it's a really deep pleasure, and I really look forward to meeting you properly, Charlotte. As two very proud mothers, we did find opportunities to share stories of our children in the time that we were together. So if I could perhaps echo the comments the Ambassador made earlier, Australia has a long-standing relationship with the European Union. It is built from a shared belief that principles such as democracy, the rule of law, human rights, and open trade build pathways for safety, security, and economic growth. At a time where rules, rights, and economic security are under pressure, our partnership is strengthening, and there is intensified Australia-EU cooperation on foreign policy, defence, security, and international trade. But Ambassador, something struck me very much in what you said before, which is that people are what creates partnerships. And today is really an opportunity to pause and to remember and to celebrate our dear colleague Rafaela and her work, including her leadership of the EU delegation in Kabul. Our profound sense of shared values is perhaps nowhere more apparent than in Afghanistan. Working on Afghanistan, Australia and the EU, our contributions are driven by a strong and long-standing commitment to the Afghan people, including through our persistent humanitarian support amidst a deepening crisis with its real implications for regional stability. Australia and the EU, together with Rafaela, stood shoulder to shoulder in condemning the Taliban's institutionalised repression and systematic human rights violations against the Afghan people. We were committed and are committed to seeing Afghanistan fulfil its international obligations, particularly to women and girls. Australia and the EU are clear-eyed about the challenges arising from the permissive environment Afghanistan provides for terrorist organisations, and we continue to work to counter those that seek to harm our interests. Australia and the EU share a conviction that a more inclusive Afghanistan is the only path forward to sustainable peace. Rafaela's pursuit of these and other diplomatic objectives embodied a kind of compassionate professionalism, and she so vibrantly melded values, interests, principles and pragmatism, empathy and outcomes. Her professional legacy is a kind of genuine, optimistic, art of the possible diplomacy that would serve us all in these really complex times. So may this legacy of hers and her memory live on for all of those who worked with her. And thank you again for the opportunity to just share a few words on this occasion, celebrating Rafaela's life, her work, her connections to Australia, and our shared international objectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucy and Manton, for those words. We very much appreciate that. And then just finally now this evening, I would like to welcome to the stage Charlotte Book to talk about your mother. Thank you.
Really, thank you for those kind words. I feel like I'm kind of like distancing myself a bit, but it really means a lot. So thank you for that. Growing up, I watched my mom being unstoppable, headstrong. She worked hard to change people's lives, particularly like women's and kids' lives. Even when people thought it couldn't be achieved, she managed to make it happen. It's still hard to speak about her in the past tense, but I'm taking this opportunity to share a few words about who she was and what my siblings and I will keep with us. Because the world lost someone special, and I'm not only saying that because I'm her daughter. She put her whole heart into everything she did. She was fully present in every aspect of her life. When you were with her, you felt seen, heard, and valued. I personally have no idea how she managed to do it all, but she did it. And even after all she accomplished, she stayed humble. She just lived by her values, which were compassion, tolerance, empathy, generosity, and a genuine commitment to helping others. She firmly believed that meaningful change comes through collaboration. She was devoted to advocate for human rights. She worked so hard to ensure women's voices were heard and girls could have equal opportunities. She lived through her values, not only in her career, but also in her personal life. She brought women together, supported them, and lifted them up. She showed us that progress doesn't happen alone, and it doesn't happen by putting other people down, but it happens through teamwork, perseverance, and hard work. By being who she was, she showed me the power of empathy and respect. She taught me that effective communication comes from respecting the other person. By seeing the other person's lived story and recognizing their humanity, you can create trust and connection. And that's when real change can happen. She never stopped standing up for others. She never remained silent, and she fought until the end. But she chose diplomacy over conflict, patience over force, and dialogue over division. So what I will carry with me is that no meaningful change happens alone. Collaboration is crucial, and we should never fight for what we believe. And for her, it was equal opportunities for all. Being able to talk about her here in Adelaide means a lot. And she visited a few times and she really liked it here. So I'm really grateful that I do have memories of her here as well. And I don't think that she realized how many lives she touched. And she would have never expected this to happen, or people to still talk about all her work, even a year after she passed away. I am so deeply proud of her, and I know that her legacy will continue through the people she met, and hopefully through people that can hear her story. So thank you.
Thank you.
Charlotte, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your very lovely words and for us to have the opportunity to hear about your mother and the work that she did. We very much appreciate it. That now really brings us to the end of this part of this evening. I'm going to encourage you all to please come through to the public reception. Come and have a drink with us. Come and talk to the ambassador. It's a chance for us to network. I would like to also just alert you to the fact that now that we are fully in business, we will have the ambassadorial lecture series as a regular feature for the Jean Monnet Centre of Excellence in Digital Transformations. So please keep an eye on that. We'll be no doubt sending out you to you details about all of that in due course. And it really just remains for me to thank again Ambassador Visentin for a terrific talk this evening. And thank you for flying to Adelaide to come and be here to be part of the centre tonight and our launch. We really appreciate it, and we very much look forward to welcoming you back in the coming years so that you can see the work that's being undertaken here. But as I say, just please join with me again in thanking Ambassador Visentin. Thank you very much.